To know more such amazing stories from Indian history, click the bell icon and subscribe to Live History India.
This miniature from the late 16th century helps put a face to a Nizam Shah ruler who was really one of a kind. Murtaza Nizam Shah I, who ruled the Sultanate of Ahmadnagar between 1565 and 1588. He was perhaps the first ruler in India who actually took a break from his rule. Unbelievable as it may seem, he took a sabbatical for 12 years, leaving the royal courts and withdrawing into the sprawling palace and estate. By the time he got back to govern, over here he became increasingly paranoid. We travel to Ahmadnagar with author and historian Pushkar Soni to trace the story of the king, who contemporary chroniclers refer to as Divana Murtaza or the Mad King Murtaza. Obviously born to privilege, this image of Murtaza reclining on his cushions while looking back with a smile gives a hint of what Sultan Murtaza Nizam Shah was like. Someone who was used to getting his way. While this picture tells us a little about the man, what it doesn't tell us about are the dynamics of power or the web of intrigue swirling around him and Ahmadnagar in the 16th century. The period of his reign was marked by internal intrigue between different factions of the nobility and external aggression as the great Deccan Sultanates fought pitched battles. The cast of characters in the Murtaza drama included his mother, Khunza Humayun, the daughter of a powerful man, his sister Chand Bibi, married to the house of Bijapur, his powerful ministers Chinggis Khan, Sahib Khan and Salabat Khan, a dancing girl Fateh Khan, and his son Miran Hussain, who eventually killed Murtaza after his father Murtaza tried to kill him. Historian Pushkar Soni, who has done decades of work on the Nizam Shahs, takes us back to the chaos of Murtaza's world and tells us his story.
Murtaza Nizam Shah, the fourth Sultan of the Nizam Shahs of Ahmadnagar, is very enigmatic. He makes a number of strange and whimsical decisions. But one has to realize his life in totality to understand the kind of factors that really shape him. To begin with, he always has to live under the shadow of his illustrious father and then his mother, who takes over the reins of the kingdom when he is enthroned as king. He succeeds his father in 1565, is formally coronated in 1566, but for 4 years, his mother, Khunza Humayun, will rule for him as the regent. She will appoint her own brothers as court nobility. She will antagonize a number of important ministers at court. She will make a number of bad diplomatic and military decisions. And in the end, Murtaza, really with the connivance of his ministers, has to reclaim his throne back. He asks her to abdicate and retire, to which she refuses. He finally has to have her imprisoned and sent off to the fortress of Shivneri, where she will spend the rest of her time. She is the daughter of Jahan Shah, one of the last kings of the Karakoyunlu Turkmens, another important dynasty. She is a woman who's a fighter in her own right, but Murtaza really cannot take this kind of domination. He has powerful women all around him. His sister, Chand Bibi, with whom we do not know of his encounters, is a very strong-willed woman in her own right. She comes back to defend Ahmadnagar after Murtaza's death. But before that, she is married to Ali Adil Shah of Bijapur. Now, Ali Adil Shah is not only Murtaza's brother-in-law, but also great rival, because Murtaza himself is married to the sister of Ali Adil Shah. Now, you have to realize that Murtaza sits at the center of a nexus of important families in the Deccan. You have the Qutub Shahs, the Adil Shahs, the Faruqis of Khandesh, the Bahmanis, and a number of important nobility who seem to keep moving between all these courts. All of them are connected by marriage over several generations to each other. And so, for example, Khunza Humayun, the mother of Murtaza, is already a cousin of the Qutub Shahs of Golconda. You have various kinds of relatives also being rivals for Murtaza. He gets very early military successes in the 1570s, after which he appoints the wrong people and has the wrong confidants. He listens to somebody called Sahib Khan or Hussain Khan, who asks him to murder one of his most successful and able generals. His Vakil and Peshwa at this time, his chief minister, so to say, is somebody called Changiz Khan. Changiz Khan is more famous as being the first master of another slave who will rise up the ranks, a gentleman called Malik Ambar. But that is digressing from this story. Changiz Khan has spectacular successes in Berar and against Khandesh on behalf of Murtaza Nizam Shah. But Murtaza Nizam Shah, under the influence of this Sahib Khan, has Changiz Khan put to death. Murtaza Nizam Shah increasingly through the 1580s becomes so paranoid that he starts mistrusting all his ministers, keeps changing them, keeps replacing them, has a number of them sent to death. In fact, Salamat Khan II is also sent off to be imprisoned in Danda Rajapuri, from where he is recalled at a much later date when Miran Hussain, the son of Murtaza, comes back to claim his throne and imprison his father. And this is because Miran Hussain has been the victim of an assassination attempt by Murtaza Nizam Shah, who thinks that his son is out to get him and therefore tries to suffocate him by putting him in a chamber, shutting all the doors and windows and setting a fire in there. Miran Hussain Shah will come back. Salamat Khan arrives too late to save Murtaza. Miran Hussain will do exactly what his father tried to do with him. Murtaza's behavior is shaped by early success, poor decisions, having his relatives as rivals, sitting in the middle of all the court intrigues, and perhaps these political and military pressures became too much for him. He could not handle his own remorse of having made bad decisions, of having put good people to death, and seclusion and the poor company of dancing girls and extremely malicious ministers really tipped him over the edge. He becomes paranoid to a point where his behavior is sometimes delusional. He loses his mind. There are times when he wants to abdicate, then he declares his intention of just leaving for Mecca, and there are times when he's tried to run away and people recognize him and bring him back. And so somebody who's clearly capable loses it over a period of time.
Murtaza's reign was troubled, and that's how most contemporary accounts have described this period. In fact, an interesting reflection of the period is this miniature of Hussain Shah, Murtaza's father. The vague outline that you see facing him is believed to have been the picture of Murtaza's mother, Khunza Humayun, who he resented. Once he took over the reins of the kingdom, he ordered that she be wiped out of the painting, quite literally. Once in power, Murtaza did manage political victories as well. At a time when there was a struggle of one-upmanship between the Adil Shahs of Bijapur and the Ahmadnagar Sultanate over the smaller Sultanate of Berar, it was Murtaza who managed to win, taking Berar into his own dominion in 1572. However, the death of his minister Changiz Khan soon after the Berar victory, as a result of palace intrigue which he fell for, seems to have been a turning point.
After the very successful campaign of Berar, Changiz Khan, his minister, is put in prison and then asked to consume poison, which he does. Changiz Khan is a very capable minister, and it is at the poor advice of bad ministers at his court that Murtaza has him punished. Once he realizes his mistake, when he's shown documentary evidence that shows Changiz Khan was actually framed and not guilty, he has a fit of remorsefulness. And he says, I am not fit to rule if I can't tell falsehood from truth, if I cannot have this judgment. And he retires to this garden called Hasht Behisht Bagh, from where he will very occasionally emerge, but he is very content there. And at this time, somebody called Hussain Khan, also called Sahib Khan, becomes his closest friend, and this man does a lot of damage to the kingdom of Ahmadnagar. To begin with, Sahib Khan orchestrates the massacres of foreigners, of people of Iranian descent in the city and kingdom of Ahmadnagar. There are at least 2 massacres in which large numbers of court nobility actually flee, and they go and find service with the Sultan of Golconda and with the Sultan of Bijapur. Sahib Khan then retires to his stronghold of Paranda, from where he makes a number of demands on Murtaza Nizam Shah. And Murtaza Nizam Shah, once he is not in close proximity to these bad people, seems to have a mind of his own. He refuses a number of these demands. Now, Sahib Khan, at one point, is assassinated by other court nobles who are sick of his behavior. Murtaza Nizam Shah appoints Salabat Khan II as the Vakil and Peshwa, as the most important minister of his court, and then again retires into seclusion with a dancing girl called Fateh Khan. And now he will dance to the tune of this girl.
This is part of the Hasht Behisht Bagh, which in turn was part of the sprawling estate that Murtaza retreated to as he went for his sabbatical in the 1570s. You can still see the gate and the classic octagonal pavilion that would have been surrounded by a water body. Records of the period tell us that there were 8 beds of flowers on the side, iterating the Hasht Behisht, or 8 heavens in Persian culture, which this entire pavilion was inspired by. Near the gate was attached a hammam, the remains of which you can see even today. This was probably added on when Murtaza shifted here. Further on, you have the unique Badgir connected through a subterranean channel that acted as a wind catcher to circulate cool air. This too was inspired by Persian architecture. Further east from this complex is the palace where Murtaza most probably lived. Today, it is in a terrible state, with encroachments and collapsing walls, but in its prime, the entire complex would have been quite spectacular. This is where Murtaza would have been lording over poets and artists, rather than ruling his kingdom. One of the reasons Murtaza Nizam Shah could afford this luxury was because during his time the coffers of Ahmadnagar were full. After the Battle of Talikota in 1565, when a confederacy of the Deccan Sultanates had defeated and destroyed the great Vijayanagar kingdom, laying its capital Hampi waste. The treasures taken helped the Nizam Shahs, but accounts tell us that by now, in the late 1570s, Murtaza Nizam Shah was under the influence of a dancing girl, Fateh Khan, and had started showing signs of losing his balance.
There is an incident in which Salabat Khan is told to bring all the jewels of the treasury and give them to Fateh Khan, who has demanded them. And Salabat Khan puts aside the most precious of these jewels and gives the rest to Murtaza Nizam Shah. And when he realizes that the most important jewels are missing, he throws the rest of them into the fire and then in a huff retires back to his palace. This kind of behavior really has no explanation, except somehow some people who are in his immediate vicinity seem to exert enormous power over him when he will not listen to anybody else. But yet, when these people are physically distant, he seems to be able to think on his own. In any case, in the last phase of his self-exile, he will be paranoid. He will think everybody wants to have him assassinated. He will suspect that of all his ministers, whom he will keep replacing with other ministers who are incapable, the kingdom really will fall apart in this time. You will have lots of people who build up their own power centers, hoping that if the king dies, they can quickly usurp power or declare independence or shift allegiance to a neighboring king.
Another thing Murtaza was paranoid about was getting killed or assassinated by his brother Burhan Shah, who repeatedly tried to claim the throne of Ahmadnagar, and then later his son, Miran Hussain.
You also have in this period the brother of Murtaza Nizam Shah, Burhan II, who keeps appearing time and again, staking a claim to the throne, and he has to be put down. Luckily, Murtaza has ministers who are also on his side who help him achieve that. Burhan Nizam Shah II eventually will find refuge in the Mughal Akbar's court. And Akbar, upon the death of Murtaza and all the troubles that take place in Ahmadnagar, will release Burhan II as the king, thinking he'll be pliant to the Mughal cause. Of course, Burhan will have his own mind, but that's another story. So Murtaza's paranoia is compounded by the fact that his brother keeps making these comebacks, once even in the guise of a holy man, to come and take over the throne. Murtaza gets it into his mind that his son is trying to kill him to get the throne, and therefore he himself tries to kill his son, Miran Hussain. Miran Hussain will escape, again with the assistance of ministers who think Murtaza has gone completely mad. They will bring him back with an army from Daulatabad and have him captured. It is in this period that Murtaza appeals to one of the last Persian emigres who has not fled his court, the historian Firishta, and asks him for his advice, saying, Miran Hussain is coming to stake his claim to the throne. I'm sure he's going to kill me. Tell me what I should do. And Firishta gives him the advice, well, you have two options. One is you take charge of your kingdom again. Get out of self-exile. Take charge of your army. Go and confront him. Meet him. The other thing you can do is bring back Salabat Khan from imprisonment where you've put him, and he will save you against Miran Hussain. And upon this advice, Murtaza has Salabat Khan recalled, but Salabat Khan will arrive too late to save him. Miran Hussain will make his way with a victorious army in Ahmadnagar. He will imprison his father, and Murtaza is finally put to death by Miran Hussain using exactly the same tactics that he tried on Miran Hussain, which is to put him into a room, burn things in there, and let the smoke suffocate him to death.
Finally, Murtaza's worst fears came true and his son did kill him, bringing the curtains down on the reign of Murtaza Diwana.
Murtaza Nizam Shah leaves a very mixed legacy for us. On the one hand, the kingdom of the Nizam Shahs is at its greatest territorially under him. He has led a number of fantastic military victories, annexed the entire province of Birar of the Imad Shahs to his kingdom. He has managed to stave off the Mughals for the most part. He has managed to keep the Adil Shahs of Bijapur subdued. He has kept the Qutub Shahs of Golconda at bay. And he has commissioned the greatest works of architecture, of art, of literature. There are men of letters from all over the world seeking employ at his court. But it is also his period which is the beginning of the downfall of the Nizam Shahs. You have completely mistrustworthy people being brought to power. You have massacres of foreigners. You have people fleeing his court. You have enormous communal unrest. You have the rise of three groups of people at the expense of the solidarity of the kingdom. The Habshis, particularly under Changiz Khan and then later under Malik Ambar, who will try to revive the kingdom. The Marathas, who seem to be increasingly in positions of power at the court. And the Dakhani Muslims, whom Murtaza Nizam Shah will also elevate to positions of power. These three factions will control the kingdom of the Nizam Shahs in its last days. And the faction that used to control a lot of the kingdom that of the Persian descendant Afakis, now has fled his court. While Murtaza manages to balance, for the most part, all these factions, whenever he goes into exile, there is enormous unrest. And the Marathas and the Habshis will eventually find power, try to revive his kingdom, try to keep it alive against the Mughals. And two great generals from the Habshis and from the Marathas will be the last commanders who will try to keep the Nizam Shahs alive, Malik Ambar and Shahji Bhosle. And so, in a sense, Murtaza's legacy is that of presiding over and cultivating a fantastic polity with lots of cultural expression, but eventually also presiding over its downfall, in the process resulting in two factions becoming dominant over the Deccan.
The reign of Murtaza marked the slide of the Nizam Shahs of Ahmadnagar, and the kingdom could never recover, finally succumbing to the Mughals. While Murtaza's sister Chand Bibi did try to put up a brave front, leading the defense against the Mughals, it was the same intrigue that plagued Murtaza's reign that got to her too. She was killed by her own troops in 1600. But that is another story.